Important question, always at the starting of my trainings. What questions do you have on anything we covered so far? Either Connect for end users or Connect for developers. What do you need me to explain a little bit more? If not, let's do it like we've done all the time. Give me a thumbs up to show me that there are no more questions. I see thumbs up. Anna Paula, thank you. Okay. In that case, let's start with the deck. Quick recap of the Cloud Blue Connect API that I want to talk about. Let's see, we are recording. So we were discussing in the last session what the general scheme is of the request flow. We have a customer. That customer places an order in a marketplace. In your case, that marketplace is Cloud Blue Commerce. Cloud Blue Commerce handles all the business parts around it, payments, fraud checking, etc., etc. And the moment everything is okay, or however you want to call it. At that moment, of course, the marketplace hands it over to Connect, and actually just Connect, but Connect on the distributor side. In that request, Connect finds a product ID, it finds a vendor ID. And the moment Connect can find those two and place those two, it hands it over internally to that respective vendor as a fulfillment request. At that point, the vendor needs to pick up that request and act on it. And act on it could be automated provisioning by own code, could be automated provisioning or fulfillment through an online tool, one of the things we're going to do today, or manual fulfillment, depending on where the vendor is in its maturity of their product in Connect together with their product on the back end. What do we need to automatically fulfill? Well, what we need is, of course, a set of APIs that does not have a set of APIs. Of course, there is nothing to provision in which case the only automation you could do is send out an email to the respective person that needs to set up the fulfillment request, and then wait for that person to do its trick, to do its wonders, to do its job, whatever you want to call it, build whatever the customer has requested, and then go back into Connect and fulfill that request. As I also said last session, is the fact that you do have APIs maybe allows you to integrate, but that doesn't mean that you have to wait to integrate your service with Connect until you go live with it. If, like on the average product, except maybe for an Office 365 kind of product, if you don't expect a huge traction on that product from the start, one of the things you could do, already set it up in Connect with manual provisioning, publish it to the distributor account that you have, import the product in your commerce environment, start setting up your service plans, and start selling. Some other group of you is at that same moment building that integration with Connect from Connect to your application later. If now a request comes in, you cannot automate it yet, but there is one person that is dedicated to doing that. He receives an email, service is provisioned, hand it back to the customer, and you're up and running. You already have a subscription. the fact that this subscription is in Connect is already very important. Anything that has been set up in Connect as a manual product will automatically start following the automation you build even after the fact that that subscription was created. The moment, for instance, a change request can be automated and the customer places a change request, that subscription in Connect will already make use of all the features of Connect. Why is this important? Because sometimes we see people saying, hey, let's build some kind of dummy product in PLM until we have our product ready in Connect. My thought is that in that case, when you do it that way, you have to migrate products from PLM only, like in-house products, to Connect, which is a migration project. If you start building it in Connect from the beginning, for commerce, the subscriptions are in Connect. And Connect is as flexible as I said. You have a subscription in there, and at the moment of creation, automated. But now you have that automation. Attempt to use that automation for every future request for that, which is a lot better than having to set up a full migration project from a PLM in-house product to a Connect in-house product. So that's for me a key reason to whatever happens, whatever type of service it is, to at least advise people to think about creating their new products, their in-house products, let's say it, into the Connect vendor ecosystem. Let's call it ecosystem. Because eventually you want this to be automated. From Connect to the service, you want to automate the create or change or cancel the service. Automation is, of course, the end goal of this whole process. Of course, that means that we get a result. We already discussed that there are several ways to do it automated. There is an API possibility, and that's actually the first thing we are going to do when we are going to build that our own integration with our SW license service. We're going to do API integration, and for us, API integration, as we mean it here, is a timed integration, meaning every 5 minutes we're and going to process it. Of course, for a large environment, maybe a timed thing might become a bottleneck, because now all of a sudden, instead of one request being sitting there and waiting, there could be a whole set of requests sitting there and waiting, with all the issues of delay, etc. So webhook eventually might be more interesting. Webhook simply means that Connect will notify your middleware and say, hey, I've got a new request, come and get it. At that point, the middleware automatically goes back. There is no delay in that, at least not the delay of the start of the process. Depending on your code, of course, depending on what type of middleware we're using, there might be a delay that middleware has to take. And then the last option, and we're going to talk about that one in our last session for Connect for Developers, is the DevOps module. The DevOps module allows us to, let's say, write our integration code and run it inside the Azure, let's call it the Azure bubble of Connect itself, meaning that it does not cost you anything in your own Azure environment as a usage scenario. It's part of the Connect subscription that you have. We create pods, Kubernetes pods, that run your code. They are automatically configured to do either API or webhook, depending on your code again. But in most cases, what we see happen here is that at this level, people are going to start using those webhook integrations. We also discussed that there is not really a big difference between the API at vendor side as well as on distributor side. Simple, we have one API. And of course, some modules are only available, and some modules are only available at the vendor side of things. And there's even one step further. Some modules are readable only by the distributor, whatever API key you have, like products. As a distributor, I cannot create a product. On the vendor side, I can do that. So depending on your authorization and authentication and thus authorization, you get access for specific methods. It's not that we have a different API for the vendor as for the distributor. It's the same set of APIs, so you can use that YAML file for both systems, or you can use that same SDK for both systems. Of course, we do have our extensions as well. This one is, of course, not that logical to say, hey, the extensions are there for both the vendor as well as the distributor. Let's be honest. I mean, a connect to commerce extension is only relevant for the distributor. There is nothing on vendor side for that, because the vendor needs to go through the distributor to a commerce environment. However, the roll-up is still present. The extension is built on top of the SDK. The SDK is built on top of the API. And we discussed our authentication and authorization, that we need those tokens for this. And this is where, as far as I remember with your group, we saw a strange behavior where I gave and let's go there quickly. Let's go and dig into that demonstration. I need that one later. Let me move this into view. There we are. A little bit down so I can toggle. I need to go to my environment and I want to go to tokens here, where we had our training token 1, where we gave all permissions, everything is enabled, and we have token 2 and token 3, where we just set one permission. And then we saw that we could read more than we thought. Well, I verified, and it appears that it's a little bit more granular, or maybe not granular, a little bit more sophisticated than I sketched it earlier. The thing is that when it comes to the token, the token has read and write to the module that we enable. So I can create a product, I can read all products. And then there are a couple of things that for me are, I would almost say, a little bit in a gray area, because the comment that I received is that everybody has read access to all modules, even though your token does not allow it, unless that module contains confidential information. And that sounds very vague, but what I mean with that is, for instance, the integrations module, you will not be able to, because a token is very confidential. A token is an authentication tool where you can, if you can just read it, you could already impersonate the person or the application that has that token. So that means that integrations will not be visible if you don't have the actual access to the module. But customers, you can see customer information because there is nothing, let's say, that confidential that an application developer should not see. The thought behind this is that it all comes and goes with who receives the token. You're not handing out tokens to just anybody. So somebody that requires a token should know what he's doing with it, first of all, and it should at least be a person that you trust in writing code that has that uses that token in a wise way. I see a hand up. Tell me, Ana Paula.
Question. Sorry. First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Uh, Quick question. So this thing you're saying about everybody having the rights to read is just for the token, right? So if I have
Well,
a
yeah,
news,
everybody
it's
that has
not.
a token, yeah, yeah.
You mean I have a user and I just go and log in, I will not be able to read anything unless I have the right. But if I have a token, it means that I should be able
Yes.
to read anything. So if
Yeah.
I just carry that token and give no rights whatsoever to this token, it means that this token will have read rights to every module, but will not be able to edit or write anything on any of
Yes,
these
yes and
modules.
no. Yeah. With the nuance, everything might not be all modules. Like for instance, integration is excluded from that read everything.
Yeah, but if I
Yeah.
want to give a token, read only token, I just give a token with no rights, let's say,
Yes.
no other rights.
Yeah,
Then,
that's how I understood it,
uh,
at least from the product team. Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So that means that I'm going to get rid of these tokens now that we've discussed that. Training token 3. I'm using training token 1, so I'm not going to remove that one. So that was a key thing to remember. Reading, writing. I've done a little demonstration there from my Insomnia setup. Skip that slide. So what are we going to do for those that are not fluent in API? We are talking here about a RESTful API, which means that we have, I would almost say, 4 key methods. There are more, but in our case, we implemented these 4 key methods. We've got a GET request, we've got a POST request, we've got a PUT request, we've got a DELETE request. Then we have, of course, a URL and a path. The path in this case is always public /v1. Let me paste it in the chat quickly, if I can do that, because we're going to need that information a little bit later. Copy. And of course, it does not react as I want. Why would it? There it is, /v. We have that path. And the URL, like I said before, in general, every API does not need, or the API URL does not need to be branded because nobody's going to see it. However, of course, you can brand your API URL if you want to, but the API URL is, as you see it on screen, api.connect.cloudblue.com. I'm going to show you later a little bit more. In our case, of course, we want an authorization header that includes our token. Key thing, we need to know who we are. And that means that you could have, in your code, you could use different tokens along the way. If we all know what probably the least privilege principle is least privilege, for me at least, means if I do something against the system, I want to do it just with all the permissions and privileges that are needed to do that. Meaning, again, like Anna Paula suggested, if I read information from a system, I should actually do it with a token that does not have write permission, just to make sure that I'm not able to use overflows that just create a, let's say, malicious transaction. It's the thought. You would probably even know better than I do how you could do that, how or what your privileges are required. You will see me do my demonstrations with all permissions in there, even though I just create, I read an asset request, etc., etc. Just because it's easier for demonstration. What we require when it comes to the body is JSON. And that means that when we parse something to our, send something to our API, to connect API in this case, what we're doing is we're doing a post to api.connect.cloudblue.com/public/v1, where there is an authentication header in there in the request, and where we, if needed, send to the API using a JSON file. I'm not sure if I gave you the, where is my browser? There's my browser. If I gave you the link to the URL where we describe the API, but you should be able to find it using the login that I gave you all to connect. Because under the help that we have here, there is the API reference. And in our API reference, as I said before, is the open API specification, where we can download the YAML file that we can import into either Postman or, in my case, into Insomnia to run those requests against the system. The advantage is each of those APIs and the way they're formatted in that YAML file have an example whatever is happening. Let me go there. If it's not needed, like in this one, get all the requests. There's an authorization header, and this parameter for me is coming from my environment. Here we have it, the authorization, where we use that specific API key that I generated for this application. Or for this account in this case. We can filter out using parameters. Those are predefined, so I only need to, let's say, select whichever one I want to enable. So there is a limit. Let's say in this case I want only one if I want to, or I can uncheck it again, in which case there will not be any filter at all. You will see that the URL preview here, those query parameters. I always like playing around a little bit with that. Besides the request and all the parameters, you will see the, let's say, the response that I'm getting, including icons, including IDs, statuses, etc. I've been playing around with building some new integration with this application. I will show you that in a later moment. Let's go back to my deck. An example of a JSON might be used as a payload. One of the things we see here is we have a REST API request where we see it's a get all requests option. Get all requests means we're reading. And for those that again are not fluent in REST APIs but want to learn around it, those methods get, post, put, and delete, and I will position them in the correct order a little bit later, are to, of course, getting information, reading information, creating information, updating information, and guess what? Delete is again deleting information. Of course, the delete depends on whether on the application it is possible to do so. Let's look at Cloud WooCommerce, where deleting a customer account in billing is not possible. We can cancel his account. That means it's not active anymore, but we still are not able to delete that information because of the fact that it is a financial system where we need our financial history for tax reasons, for legal reasons, etc., etc. So again, that could happen on the vendor service side as well. In our case, with those licenses, we are able to delete those licenses. Whatever client you want to use, Insomnia, Postman, PAW, or just command line with curl, it's up to you. However you want to do it, it's up to you, whatever you run. You will see me use during this training again. Why again? It has a very nice learning curve. It's pretty simple to learn. It allows me to, in an easy way, reuse the same API calls within different, let's say, within different authentication and authorization domains by just switching the environment that I'm selecting. And basically the only difference in that environment is the API. Which from a training perspective is a perfect way to quickly toggle and show you the difference of vision on how does a distributor see this later? How does a vendor see this? What information are we finding there? Insomnia, if you haven't installed it yet, as I gave you homework for, please do so now, because we're going to use it in one of our next return data. In this case, we're looking at a request, meaning that it is a product that, or a subscription that has been created already. It's not a purchase request, which is the first request always. One of the things we can see here, this last number here, is the, I would say, the counter of this subscriptions. The counter of this subscriptions requests that have been created, where the 001 is always the purchase request. So it looks like this is the third change request that is made for this subscription. Purchase request is 1. The first change request is 002. Second, third, 004. For the rest, we see the asset ID, meaning this is the subscription ID in Connect. This is the subscription ID in the external system, as it is in this case randomly generated. Normally, this would be your subscription ID from Connect. So if you want to, you can not only use your subscription ID in Commerce, search for subscriptions in Connect, because the external ID is in this request. We also see for what product it is. We see for in which distributor account this is created, and we see from which vendor this request comes. And this is what I meant with all this information is seen on the distributor side. The distributor now looks for vendor and product ID and hands it over to the appropriate vendor for further processing. I also see that this is a preview. This is not a live scenario. A lot more information. At the end, what is interesting is that it gives me for which marketplace this request, or from which marketplace this request seems to be coming. Besides that, there is a request status. In this case, it's pending. So let me go up to, there is a purchase request or a provisioning request of type change in the status that is pending. And a does not really support changes, would be, of course, change in status pending might even have a third possible option. So those are a couple of important fields for you to look at. When I'm going to build my integration, the first thing you need to know is that if you look at asset requests, the first thing you verify is what is the status, and I need to know all the status that all the statuses that are pending. Of course, after that, you can verify what type it is and have some kind of if-then statement, or just if statement or case statements, however you. And that status pickup is pending.